Nu op Discovery, Boys Toys en de classic wheels van Fiat.
The Fiat Cinquecento, built in Poland, is the latest in a line of super compact Italian cars that extends back before the Second World War. The design of the cars in the line has evolved dramatically over 50 years, but each has carried one name: Cinquecento, 500, the magnificent Italian Mini. The Topolino had been the right car for hard times. When the last 500C rolled off the line in 1952, more than 500,000 Topolinos of all types had been sold. But Fiat knew that a replacement was needed and turned once again to Dante Giacosa to provide. In other parts of Europe, the rear engine had proved itself as a workable solution to reducing automobile size and cost. Ferdinand Porsche's air-cooled rear-engine Volkswagen was starting to come off the production line, in an attempt to both rebuild Germany's automobile industry and to provide cheap transport for German and British troops. A rear engine also powered the closest thing France would ever have to a people's car, the Renault 4CV. Dante Giacosa decided to build Fiat's new mini car around a rear-mounted engine as well. And in 1955, the new 600 was born, with a rounded profile for better aerodynamics. The 600's rear engine had been adapted from the 570cc 16-horsepower motor mounted in the Topolino. By now, that power plant was capable of producing 32 horsepower and a top speed of 62 miles an hour. Fiat would build many future cars around the same power plant, including the 127, the Panda, and Uno, and of course, the new Cinquecento. Instrumentation and accessories were minimal. The 600 had few frills. The 600, its sedan and station wagon versions displayed here at the Turin Auto Show, was an improvement on the Topolino, but it was cheaper than its forebear as well, making it Italy's first true people's car. The automobile a growing urban population could afford. The 600 quickly became the standard Italian taxi, the city car, the utility, and the delivery vehicle. But it also had appeal amongst rural people. It was reasonably comfortable and climbed well in Italy's largely mountainous terrain. The 600 also became the Italian farmer's car. During its 25-year career, the 600 was built under license in Germany, Spain, Argentina, and even Yugoslavia. More than 2.5 million were produced by the time production ended. The 600 was a fine little car, well suited to the winding, narrow streets of Italy's medieval cities. But Fiat was not satisfied. There'd been a time when Fiat reigned supreme over the market for low-cost transport for the Italian working class. The company watched with alarm as motor scooters, the Vespa and the Lambretta, took over part of Fiat's market. The Vespa was marketed under the slogan, "Better a scooter today than a car tomorrow." The trend seemed to be from small to smaller. The ESO company had developed a covered motorbike, the bubble car, which was also produced under license in Germany by BMW. France, Citroën had aimed its 2CV at the market for the barest of bare-bones transport. Fiat wanted Dante Giacosa to develop something even smaller and even cheaper than the 600, something to seize back the customers who'd been eyeing scooters or bubble cars. A car, in other words, more micro than mini. Giacosa's answer was the Nuovo Cinquecento, the new 500. The design of the tiny car was extremely simple. The roof was a single sheet of canvas, which gave the car the designation Cinquecento Transformabile, 500 convertible. It was designed as a two-seater with extra luggage space behind the driver, which would eventually be turned into a rear bench for passengers. Although the early advertising was aimed at the growing number of female drivers, the car's 4 gears were not synchronized, which required some rather fancy double declutching. In fact, the 500 was so inexpensively built that it lacked even hubcaps. The outside body panels were pressed from the same piece of sheet steel as the inner door, as a way to save on steel. The finished door was then simply bolted onto the car's body, backwards, suicide style. The bonnet covered only the fuel tank and air vents. Like the 600, the Nuovo Cinquecento carried its engine in the rear. Giacosa had tried out several designs for the motor, including a flat twin, later used by the Sterpuch company, which built the 500 under license in Austria. But for the Italian 500, the engineers finally settled on the simplest possible solution, a 479cc vertical parallel twin-cylinder engine. Vibrations were reduced by mounting it on springs. The car was ready. Now all that remained was the introduction to a waiting public. Fiat presented the Nuovo Cinquecento to the public on July the 4th, 1957, in one of the era's more spectacular product launches. A procession of 500s paraded through the streets of Turin, each sporting a model in designer clothing, to meet such luminaries as Cardinal Montini, the future Pope Paul VI, and King Leopold of Belgium, as well as actors like Ugo Tognazzi and Viernalisi, and racing driver Juan Fangio. The design team had met their goals. They had created a car that could be marketed as the car for scooter owners. Like the scooter, the 500 was cheap at the pump. It was almost as easy to find a parking place for the baby car as for a Vespa. And it was nimble dodging through traffic, which held great appeal for the motorbike crowd that was used to bypassing queues and exploiting Italy's lax traffic regulations. At the same time, the new Cinquecento was big enough to take the family on a picnic in the country, particularly appreciated now that most workers had what was called an English weekend, both Saturday and Sunday off. Best of all, the designers had made it so that the car could be offered at the amazingly low price of 500,000 lire, 20% under the price of the Fiat 600. The 500 represented all-round urban transport, the car for everybody, from the doctor to the housewife to the working man. Changes in Italian society led to changes in the nuovo Cinquecento. At first, the improvements were marginal. Fiat offered a giardiniera, station wagon version. The 500D in 1960 added wind-down windows and a real sunroof. Then, in the mid-60s, changes in traffic laws forced more radical redesign. With the 500F and 500L, the suicide door was eliminated and more powerful headlights were installed. The booming consumer culture brought an emphasis on whiter whites and better living through acquisition. That meant a box of washing powder for your new 500L for luxury, a second car for the ever more prosperous middle class. The 500's bodywork was now sturdier as well. The shell was no longer two side sheets bolted to a roof and chassis, but a true welded monocoque body with a larger windscreen and fuel tank. The Fiat Cinquecento had moved a couple of rungs further up the social ladder. Fiat was not alone in producing a mini car. In Britain, petrol rationing had continued after the war, and still it seemed there were too many cars on the road. The BMC company decided a small city car was the solution, and in 1959, the Morris Mini Minor began to roll off the assembly line. Instead of the Fiat 500's rear-mounted vertical twin engine, the Mini Minor featured a revolutionary design laying the motor transversely, connected directly to the front wheels, eliminating the transmission shaft. The Mini Minor would later be produced in Italy under license by the Cinquecento company, which had earlier helped to push Fiat into the mini car business with its Lambretta scooter. Eventually, Cinquecento itself would be absorbed into the Fiat empire, though even today it still produces Italian microcars under its own brand name. The Italians loved racing and would race anything, from the silly little bubble cars in the legendary Mille Miglia race open to anybody, to the Fiat 500s. Europe's master craftsman at adapting road cars to the racetrack was Carlo Abbat, here in the center. A northern Italian from the German-speaking Tyrol region, Abbat had played a key role in winning a design contract for Ferdinand Porsche with the Cisitalia Racing Car Company after the Second World War. That contract started Porsche down the road that led to his famous rear-engine sports car. So it seemed only natural that Abbat should see the racing potential in the rear-engine Fiat mini cars. Abbat started working on the 500 shortly after its introduction.